Joining us on our Newsmaker line right now to talk about it is Jake Morabito. Jake is Director of Communications and Technology Task Force at the American Legislative Exchange Council, an organization that you are well aware.
I am.
Mr.
Great
Hughes.
Organization.
Let's go to Jake and see what he thinks of this bill. Jake, how are you? Welcome to the Rod and Greg Show.
Thanks so much for having me on. Looking forward to this really important conversation.
Well, let's talk about this. Why is it so important in your opinion, Jake?
Well, I think in recent years, especially as technology has become such an important part of our lives, people are looking at what is the impact that technology and social media and even things like artificial intelligence, how is that impacting the development of children? And, there's really passionate arguments on both sides of the equation because, now harmful or age inappropriate content seems to be easier than ever for kids to access if there's not any parental supervision happening. But at the same time, they are going to need to be taught how to appropriately use AI, in their future jobs and things like that. So how do we find that balance? And states like Utah are now enacting new laws, and it really remains to be seen, if there's going to be legal challenges, but I'm sure we might get into some of that in this talk.
So we've had this discussion on the program, and I think it's something that's absolutely necessary. There are adult sites that were never meant for kids or shouldn't be that minors shouldn't be able to access. But we've had some guests on the program that have said there are too many workarounds. That the idea that you're going to be able to create firewalls to keep kids away from these sites, it's really going to take parents that are going to have a much more hands-on relationship with their kids and their access to phones and the internet. Is there something we can do to create a trustworthy sound firewall to keep our kids away from harmful content?
I think that's an excellent concern that you just raised, and a key problem that some opponents of the bill have raised is that this isn't a silver bullet solution here. And essentially what this bill would do, called the App Store Accountability Act, is essentially require the app stores, so that would be the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store, whenever there is a new account for a minor, they're going to have to conduct age verification, which means that they're going to be either collecting some sort of government identification or a credit card to verify somebody's age, or down the line perhaps like a facial recognition or biometric scan of some sort to verify the age. Now, some people and some of the companies, even like Google, who would be regulated by this, they're raising that there could potentially be privacy or security concerns if that sensitive information gets leaked, which we all know it seems like these companies all from time to time, for better or for worse, get leaked. So that could be potentially putting sensitive information at risk if they do this verification. And so essentially you have platforms like Meta, X, Snapchat, and others are saying it should be the app stores doing the verification. Google and Apple might be saying it should be the platforms themselves doing the verification. And so it's kind of an intra-party squabble. And Alec thinks that, going back to what you were saying, is that parents have a really important role in how to effectively teach their children how to use these tools. And the good news is a lot of platforms like Instagram and Snapchat have parental controls baked into these tools. So you might, if you set up an iPhone for your minor child, if you set it up properly, you'll be able to today strictly control everything they can do on the iPhone. They won't be able to download new apps without your permission or spend any money on your credit card. But it does take that active, involved parent, which that can cause some concern if some parents either aren't doing that monitoring, or if they don't believe it's important, and others think that these kids need to be protected at all costs.
Jake, how will they know, though? I mean, let's say a kid is using maybe a parent's credit card to pay for one of these apps. How will they know that that individual is not 18 if, in fact, they're using a parent's credit card? How would they know?
It's really an open question. This is a first of its kind law, the first one to get over the finish line and actually become law. So I guess we will see if it actually gets implemented, how this works in practice. But I think you're right that kids are ingenious, and they know the technology better than you and I do, and they're going to find a workaround. Or maybe it's as simple as maybe a parent, the child's like, I want to get on Facebook, and the parent opens it up for them and allows them to scroll Facebook and get past the verification. So what ALEC does, and the American Legislative Exchange Council, our members develop model legislation to help state lawmakers create policies rooted in free market limited government principles. And our members passed a policy limiting the use of personal cell phones in schools, which is an issue that a lot of states and localities have been taking up, is to reduce distractions in the classroom. So we think that is a viable route for states to take if they want to reduce distractions and addiction to social media in the classroom. Let's start with that, so that way they can actually learn their lessons and focus and hone their attention spans. And then another thing that we do is, like I was alluding to earlier, is teaching the responsible use. And that takes parents, but it also takes educators as well, demonstrating and modeling in the classroom when it's appropriate to be using the internet, which sites, and what are some of the risks involved. There's cybersecurity vulnerabilities. There's human trafficking even, sadly. There's also some horrible issues with deepfake AI, impersonations, and non-consensual intimate images being leaked, even by students. So it's a really problem. There's a lot of concerns and danger out there. So kids need to get up to speed on what the risks are.
So, Jake, what about privacy issues? So let's say that I subscribe to everything that you said, and I want to be a good parent. I want to do all this. The issuing or presenting of state-issued ID on the internet to an app store or for an app, are we confident enough that our ID is going to be protected, that would not be used for identity theft in any way? How do we ensure that the protection of our privacy stays as strong as possible if we're presenting ID to make sure that we're not a minor?
It's definitely a risk, and a lot of times the way this legislation is crafted is, they stipulate in the legislation that the ID, once the verification has occurred, then the platforms have to delete it, or they can't retain the information longer than necessary. But as that's essentially only as good as if it actually happens or not. And if someone doesn't comply, either willfully or not, then all of a sudden that could be exposed to bad actors. And the technology for digital ID, it's improving. I know some states have been experimenting with that. I think Louisiana and Maryland, and maybe even Utah as well, have been pioneering in that department. But still, I don't think we're there quite yet, for every point of sale, especially with sensitive information for minors like this. So it really remains to be seen. And I do expect, several of these laws regulating social media have been challenged in the courts. And in fact, in California, an appellate court there just struck down again a California law for their so-called age-appropriate design code. So I imagine a lot of these, I could see a legal challenge coming to Utah and maybe citing that recent decision. And then we could be back to square one.
Going to be interesting to follow. Jake, appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.